Potentially the top prospect in the QMJHL and a top 10 pick in the draft. We'll talk about Caleb Desnoyers in detail on today's Prospect Spotlight at Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalakash, QMJHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian High, USHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospect. And on today's show, we've got an in-depth scouting report on Caleb Desnoyers for you. We're going to be talking about the overall skill set in the first segment and the profile of Caleb Desnoyers. Talk about the shooting, the passing, the handling, the skating, all that good stuff in the first segment. Then in the second segment, we'll dig deep. We'll go into the habits, the toolkit, the decision-making, processing, how he approaches the game, and how that kind of helps him project as a top 10 pick for this next upcoming 2025 NHL draft. And then in the final segment, we'll talk about the projection with Caleb Desnoyers, where he ends up on draft day, what type of player we're talking about at the NHL level, both in terms of floor and ceiling, and which team would be the best fit, along with some comps for him. We'll give you some comparables of NHL players who fit his style. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started right away here with the overall profile with Caleb Desnoyers. Talk me through size, handedness, where he plays, by how many points he's leading his team, because it's a lot and it's a good team. Let's get into it.
Absolutely. So Caleb Desnoyers is a 6'2", 172-pound left shot center who plays with the Moncton Wildcats in the QMJHL, the best team in the QMJHL, where he currently has 27 goals and 62 points in just 39 games. And just to humor you, because this has been a talking point for us pretty much all season long, he leads his team by a pretty gargantuan I believe it's like 17 points at the moment. It's been as high as 20 in recent weeks, ahead of Alex Mercier and Yuri Pekarchik, as well as Julius Sumpf. So you have three pretty intriguing and very different stylistic kind of compliments there to Desnoyers, but it's been very clear all season long that he drives the offense, and he's such an intelligent player, and everything goes through that, which we're going to explore in the second segment. But his puck skills are nothing to scoff at either, right? Like his playmaking and handling especially are really noteworthy aspects of his game, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really about the way he uses them, but in isolation, like the passing is pretty good. He's got really good versatility on his passes. He's able to hook passes through sticks. He's able to kind of slip them under sticks. He's really good at kind of changing the angle on his pass in order to connect with teammates. And he also has he's been growing his ability to not just play a connective game, but play a creative one as well, where he's trying to get the primary assist. He's trying to zip passes through seams onto teammates' sticks cross ice. Like his passing game's growing as well. At the start of the year, he was definitely more of a connector. He was a guy who would make the simple plays, the low to high passes, the third pass on a goal. But now he's really becoming a lot more of a versatile playmaker, and a true playmaker, true creative playmaker, which has been really useful for his game, because you want to see a player try to create off his stick. And there's a reason why he leads his team by 17 points now. He is the offensive fulcrum of his team. But also the shots improved a decent amount as well. I wasn't really high on his shot at the start of the year, and especially not last year. I thought it lacked power. It lacked versatility and it lacked accuracy. I had it as an average to below average grade, but for me now it's a 5.5, 6 grade shot. He's got the ability to curl and drag around sticks. He can shoot in motion. He loves to kind of delay or change the angle on his shot in order to kind of maximize his efficiency. And he's gotten better at picking corners. I mean, he's at 27 goals in 39 games right now. A lot of them come from around the net, so it does have to do more with his positional sense and his understanding of how the puck is going to get to him in terms of scoring, and that definitely has to do more with hockey sense than pure shooting skill. But the shooting skill has improved, which is really promising with Desnoyers, because you want him to be that dual threat scorer moving forward. And lastly, for the handling, I mean, we're talking about a player who He has some feet issues. For me, he's about a 5 grade skater. He's not elite, but he's not really particularly bad either. He can generate speed in transition. He can use crossovers to get around sticks. And his handling kind of is on the same page as his skating. That's what makes it a 6.5 grade for me. It's not in the sense that he's going to dangle through multiple opponents and kind of drive his way to the net. It's more of that meticulous, like, once he catches a puck in the offensive zone, he's able to quickly move it to his backhand to solve one problem and get to the next. That's kind of my read on his handling overall. It fits well with the style he's playing right now. But
Yeah.
what's your read on his skating as well? Because I think at EP we're pretty much all over the page regarding his skating. But I think we can all agree that it's kind of mechanically limited, right?
There are some mechanical limitations, certainly, and like those a lot better than I do with the amount of viewings that you've logged of this player this
Yeah.
season. I think what stood out to me was a lack of lower body power. This is a very like intense player and a guy that can be quite dogged physically and just bulldoze his way to the middle of the ice. But in order to do that, he has to be at a higher speed, and he struggles to do that from a standstill. So that
Mm.
explosive speed is something that I think still needs to develop in his game. But again, this is a 6'2", 172-pound player at the moment, so a lot of filling out to do. He's definitely going to be over 200 pounds probably once he's playing full-time NHL minutes in the prime of his career. And once he gets there with that dogged mentality and his very quick processing speed, I think this is a very dangerous player as well, and that the skating could look significantly better once he's a finished product compared to how it does now, with how it'll combine with the other elements in his game. But one more thing I want to mention about the handling is there's definitely a lack of like dynamic pop with it. He's not the most creative of puck handlers, but he's able to layer it in so fluidly with the other aspects in his game and his toolkit. I loved in flashes how he was able to layer it in with his physicality and initiating contact, still keeping very close control of the puck through those situations and getting to dangerous areas even by a more direct route through an opposing player rather than just around them. So that's something I also look for with puck handlers at the junior level in terms of progressing that talent to the professional ranks.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that overall with Desnoyers, it's a lot more about making smart plays rather than crafty plays. He's really like he plays chess. His game is very chess like. But he's starting to develop a bit more of a kind of football esque approach to the game, where he's trucking through guys on the forecheck. He's disrupting plays with hits. I think his physicality is high end. Like it's a 6.5 for me. Out of our nine level tool grade at elite prospects, he's incredibly physical. He has really good protective edges. I think when you talk about edge work with him, the issue is more agility, like having those crisp cutbacks that he can explode off of when he's driving up the ice and wants to kind of change paces, change directions. I think that's a limitation, but he has really good protective edges when he's kind of down low, working the forecheck, trying to protect the puck along the boards and kind of get off of the wall. He has that ability to just protect the puck with his edges, plant his feet, and kind of do something good with it. But I do agree that he has some lower body strength limitations right now. But again, like you said, 6'2", 178. He's going to add a decent, at least 20 pounds of weight by the time he reaches the NHL. That'll help a ton. But even right now, with the way that he plays, like he's a dog on the forecheck. He's incredibly competitive as well. We'll get to the more mental aspects in the second segment here, but overall, the skill set is good enough for a top 15 pick, but it's not the skill set that really makes him a potential top 10 pick. And some people are even talking about top 5 for this kid. There's a lot of conversation around that. We have a lot of differing opinions at Elite Prospects, and I think we'll get into those in the third segment where we go into kind of why exactly, you know, I disagree with Daniel. Mitch disagrees with Cam. Like, there's a bunch of different opinions here about Caleb Desnoyers. But we'll take a quick break and head into the more mental aspects of the game. And this is really where Caleb Desnoyers shines. So we'll get into that in a sec. Let's just take a quick break and hear from our sponsors.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds in front of you and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to fanduel.com to get started. Bet with just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
Alrighty, so moving on to the second segment here, we'll talk about the more mental aspects of Caleb Denoy's game and just the overall kind of deep dive on what makes him special. Habits, toolkit, processing, decision making. The overall mindset of this kid, though, is really what stands out the most in this segment. Right, like everything I've heard about this kid is that he's one of the most elite competitors that you'll ever get. And in this draft class, I don't think anyone comes close to this kid's mindset. And when you look at his track record, this kid always forces himself into top sixes, into top line responsibilities, top power play, top PK. Like this kid's track record is absolutely phenomenal at every level, whether it's U18 AAA, whether it's his first year in the Q, whether it's the Holinka Gretzky Cup or the U17 World Championship. Like every single level, this kid just manages to force himself into the top six of any roster he plays on. What do you think that is exactly? What's the separating factor on that side?
I think competitiveness is certainly one of those, but it's also just the reliability. I think both on and off the ice, he's always going to put in all the work that you could expect, and probably more than what you expect on both on the ice and off. But on like in terms of the two-way impact, the reliability, the adaptability, no matter who you play on his wings, his ability to elevate them and to make their lives easier and allow them to flourish. It's one of the reasons that he was such a key component in all three gold medal victories there for Team Canada at the World Under 17s, at the World Under 18s, and at the Holinka Gretzky. He was one of the three players, I believe, that were part of each of those teams alongside Matthew Schaefer and Jack Ivankovic. And he was an important piece in the top six every single time because he could elevate the players around him, make their lives easier, and just be so reliable in making the right play at the right time, but also search for the best play when the moment was right for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the main standout. Everything I've heard about this kid also tends towards a player who wants to get better, who will do everything to get better, to improve, to make the NHL, to be the best version of himself he can be. And I think that was the closing argument that kind of sold David, who wasn't as sold on Caleb Denoy at Elite Prospects in our meeting, on putting him at 12th overall, which for some people was still very low for him, including myself. I think he's a top 10 pick. Um, but the thing that led to Caleb being the guy that we put at 12th overall, ahead of Braden Coots, ahead of some of these other guys that were available in the same range, is that Caleb's going to get better. Like he's going to get better. There's no doubt about it. Everything I've heard about this kid, like I said, is about how determined he is to be the best version of himself he can be. And I think that plays a major part in why coaches trust him because that bleeds through his game. I think right now with Moncton, again, he leads them by 17 points. He's the offensive fulcrum on that team. He's a guy that everyone goes to when they need a goal, when they need a point, when they need something to happen on the ice. So I feel like I think it's less of an issue of, when you talk about his lack of pace, his lack of dynamic involvement, I don't think it's an issue of not wanting to play with a higher pace. I think it's an issue of having to dose himself given how often he's on the ice. I think it's a matter of picking his moments to go all in, picking his moments to just truck through a guy on the forecheck or carry the puck at high speeds in transition. Because it's something that I guess is difficult for him to do right now on every single shift because of the mechanical limitations. So he has to pick his moments. He has to kind of be a bit more selective with when he does it. But overall, I think if we move on to the processing as well, which I think plays well into that, he picks his moments really, really well. Like you'll see him frequently set the tone on the forecheck at the start of a shift because he knows that the moment he trucks through a defenseman on the forecheck, those defensemen heading into the next retrieval behind their net are going to check their shoulders multiple times, are going to be on high alert, and that could lead to panicky moments and turnovers in favor of his team and mistakes, right? Like, this is a kid
Yeah.
who understands the game at a meta level.
Absolutely. He has a really good understanding of the pace of the current game, where his team and the opposition are currently at, and where momentum is going. And he makes consistently good decisions in terms of keeping that momentum going, keeping that activity rate high if it's in his team's favor, and also just trying to throw maybe a wrench into the equation if it's not working out. Also, just like perhaps setting the tone with a big hit on the forecheck, not even just to make defenders more nervous in the breakup, but just to bring a bit more physicality, fire his own team up as well. He's very opportunistic in his involvements there as well. And I think that he's not a player who's ever going to take like a penalty at like the worst possible moment. He's so disciplined when it matters most. And I mean, he only has 22 penalty minutes this season in 39 games, playing a really big matchup role against top lines
Yeah.
throughout the QMJHL. And I don't think any of them have come at like in the tail end of games, like in the last couple minutes when his team is fighting to stay in the game. Like he's a really, really reliable player in that way. And it's one of the reasons that the coaches, whether it's internationally for Team Canada or with the Moncton Wildcats, just send him over the board so constantly. He plays so many minutes wherever he is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's so easy to trust as well because he's locked in. Like, this kid, you can see it in his eyes when he's playing. Like, he is just like in his zone. He's locked in. You're not getting him out of his mental comfort zone. Like, he's locked in when he's playing. And he can deal with those chippy, like, between the whistle, cross checks, and all that stuff. He gets involved, but it doesn't budge him. Even when he takes a big hit in neutral ice, a scrum ensues, guys are flying around him. He's just locked into his game, and that's really impressive to me. The processing is also really good. Like, this is a kid who is able to make really good decisions in transition, even though a lot of them have more to do with kind of delegating, skating up the ice, that kind of stuff. He's able to skate the puck up the ice, but mainly he's a player who slows down the play. So when he does skate the puck up the ice, he cuts inside, which is a good habit. He slows down the play, which is a good habit as well, and finds trailers, finds supporting teammates in transition to kind of get them the puck and get them chances. Um, but he only flashes the ability to kind of drive through a defense in really inconsistent flashes. And that's kind of the reason why, and I understand it, it's the reason why Daniel and David and Mitch have some doubts about Caleb Desnoyers here at Elite Prospects. But the way he circumvents that, the way he compensates for that, and just the mental aspects of this game are too solid for me to kind of overlook. So I really like what I've seen from him mentally. I think that's if it wasn't for the mental aspects of this game, he wouldn't be in my top 10, because I agree that the dynamism isn't enough. The skill is good but not elite. So what really makes him an elite player in this draft for me is the mindset. It's the hockey sense. It's the competitiveness that he plays with, and the fact that he's always just so disciplined, so mature, like you mentioned. Those are things that teams look for and teams will draft high for, right? Like, teams always swing high on these really, really mature, even though they're kind of relatively limited mechanically type of players. Like, we've seen those guys go in the top 5 before. Cutter Gochi is a great example of that, right?
Definitely. It's definitely a profile that NHL teams adore, especially when it comes with the type of adulation in like the off ice report cards from anybody they call, whether it's a person on the Moncton Wildcats or a childhood friend or family. Like, doesn't really matter. Every single endorsement is a glowing one for Desnoyers. And I think one question I still wanted to ask you about the interaction of the tools is between the different physical tools that we broke down in the first segment. Which 2 or 3 do you think he blends in a way that's going to be the most projectable to being dynamic at the NHL level?
I think the playmaking and physicality will combine the best.
Yeah,
Because he's gotten really good at making plays off the wall, at getting off the wall with the puck under pressure and making plays. I think that's going to start to become his identity. I think he's going to become a high cycle specialist where he's really good at circling high, identifying and anticipating where the puck's going to go, and countering opposing breakouts. It's a breakout counter pressure. It's kind of like gegenpressing in German football, in German soccer, right? Like, he's really good
absolutely.
at waiting for the moment where other teams try to break the puck out, and then immediately he hops into passing lanes. He hops onto carriers, and then creates a lot of disruption that way off the wall. And then from there, he's able to just attack the slot, make some great passes, take some
Yeah.
shots in transition. I think that's going to be a specialty in the NHL game. Forechecking hard, making really good reads when the opponents try to break the puck out, and then bang, right on the puck, taking a shot, that type of thing.
Turning defense to offense and in the zone where it matters most.
Yeah, 100%. That's his game. But that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third segment here, where we get into the projection elements with Caleb Desnoyers. Floor, ceiling, where he goes on draft day, where he ends up as a player, and which teams would be the best fit. We'll get into that in a sec. Let's just hear from our sponsors first and take a quick break. Alrighty, so let's close things off here with the projection segment for Caleb Desnoyers. And let's start with the projection of where he goes on draft day. Because if you ask different teams, they'll get different opinions depending on what they're looking for. If they're looking for a dynamic skill element, they're not going to have Caleb Desnoyers in their top 10. If they're looking for a game changer, a guy who can change the tide in a game with really good discipline, effort, motivation, leadership qualities, then Desnoyers is not just a top 10 pick. I think there's a chance if the right team selected it, it could go at 5. Do you agree?
5 to 12 is the range that I have in mind. I think he could go as high as 5. I don't think he breaks into the top 4 of
Yeah.
this year's draft. But 5, I think, isn't a bit of an outside shot, but definitely not impossible. Especially, I mean, on Bob McKenzie's recent rankings, he was 6th, and I mean, the player in front of him, Anton Frondel, is a guy that we're going to cover in tomorrow's episode, and is one that we're significantly less enthusiastic about, especially with the recent performances this season. So I think it's possible he climbs his way into that range. But I also think it's possible he ends up going in that 10 to 12 range, especially like in the top 12 on draft day. There's always a lot of movement. Last year, we saw Zeev Buium and Sam Dickinson fall to 12th and 11th overall, respectively.
Yeah.
I think I like Desnoyers could be a victim of just other guys butting ahead of him, but it very much depends on the teams that pick in that range. I think if, for instance, the New York Islanders are picking at 9th overall, Desnoyers' name would be very, very high up their
Yeah.
board.
100%. I agree. I think that there's a chance he goes 5. I personally wouldn't take him at 5. I have him in my 7 to 10 range. But I still think that if the right team's picking at 5 and they're looking for a specific profile, a guy who's going to be a leader on the team moving forward, a guy who has a winner's mentality, all these things that you hear from old school scouts, honestly, still have some value, right? Like you want a guy who wants to improve. You want a guy who wants to win, who has the winner's mindset, who has the leadership qualities, who has those intangibles that some scouts are so terrified of. I see the value in that, and it has some because it's really difficult to quantify that. And with the direction that current scouting is going, which is great, at least the better results, like quantifiable results, qualifiable results, like what's going on the ice, how mechanically sound the shot is, how good their edge work is, do they have the proper knee bend and ankle flexion and all that, like that has some great value. But what Caleb Desnoyers brings to the game is just like it goes outside of that scope,
Yeah.
which I think will muddy things because depending on who's picking in that range, it'll be very peculiar. I think he goes 5 to 10. I'd be very, very surprised
Yeah.
if he slips out of the first round, of the top 10 rather. I mean, I'd be absolutely floored if he slips out of the first round, but that's
The
not a
Montreal
conversation.
Canadiens would be trading up at 20th at the latest.
Yeah, 100%. But what's really interesting is the floor with Desnoyers. Like, I do not see a scenario in which Desnoyers is anything less than a third line center at the NHL level. Do you?
Not many. I mean, maybe a slightly bigger chance of 4C than you see, but I mean, yeah, this is a middle six center, I think, as a baseline, and that intelligence, that intensity, that desire to learn, elevating his teammates consistently, being just so disciplined both on and off the ice. This is the profile of a player that just makes the NHL in some capacity bare minimum. And
Mhm.
there's so much to work off of, especially with the intelligence and the progression of his physicality and skating once he adds some weight. There's a lot to like here with this player. And I think both of us see very clear top 6 upside with this player as well. So talk me through the style of play you think he'll be playing at the NHL level.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a versatile two-way playmaking forward. He's going to be able to play more of a checking game when it matters. He's going to be able to play more of a finesse game when it matters. He's got that ability to just break defenses open with a really good inside drive, with slowing down the play, with kind of opening up the ice. But he also has that ability to just truck through guys on the forecheck. So having that combination, having that ability to just play a very versatile game, it's going to lead him to be a two-way center, I think, because the defensive game's good as well. He's really good positionally. He's really good in terms of processing, understanding, again, like, turning defense into offense with that kind of counter pressing we were talking about. Those are all elements of a two-way center. So I think that's how he develops, I think, at the NHL level. But he has the playmaking skill to be a bit more. He's got the shot to be a bit more. So you have a dual threat, forechecking, two-way center. I mean, what more can you ask of from a center? So that's what leads me to think that he has true top six upside. Like, he could play on the first line as kind of one of the lower end first liners in the NHL, one of the lower end first line centers. If we're talking about a team that has really, really, really good wingers, he's going to be the type of guy who's going to elevate those guys' skills so well. But for me, in terms of the most likely outcome for him, is a 1A, 1B center who likely plays on the second line behind a more skilled first line center, and just holds down the fort on that second line and just drives play. I think he has that ability. So that's kind of my read on that. But we have a bunch of comps for this guy as well. Like, we were wrecking our heads about this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similar players to that in the NHL right now, right?
Definitely, and some that are, I mean, undergoing a massive like resurgent season, such as Sean Monahan this year with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Easily one of my two favorite storylines this season in the entire NHL.
Yeah.
Through the heartbreak of the offseason and returning to point of game form alongside Kirill Marchenko and Dmitry Voronkov on the top line in Columbus. He's such an intelligent playmaking two-way center who played excellent hockey. I mean, in Calgary for the first like decade of his career, was really, really good in Montreal, returning from injuries that he was suffering in his last years in Calgary, and now is just back to a top line player in Columbus. And I mean, they're in a playoff race right now, and in large part due to Monahan's efforts as well. But that combination of intelligence and playmaking and also physical abilities, which is something I think that not many people give Monahan enough credit for, is his physical game and how he compensates for subpar skating with that. I think that Desnoyers' skating is better than Monahan's, but Monahan has had knee injuries. So in terms of where it was at in his draft year, relatively comparable perhaps. But there's a couple other comps here as well. And there are two that you brought up where it's perhaps not a comp of where the player is at today, but rather where they were at 5-ish years ago, and that would be Jordan Stahl and Braden Shen. So talk me through those two players.
Yeah, they're pretty similar in their kind of two-way forechecking approach, while also having the finesse skill to be able to play up a lineup, to be able to support better, more skilled, more dynamic elements on a second line. Braden Shen even played a decent stint on the first line for St. Louis. He was one of their leaders. I think he was their captain at one point. Am I wrong about that? I think he was their
I'm pretty
captain.
sure he was. I believe
Yeah.
so.
Then that leadership ability, that dogged ability to just kind of dig deep into effort and just rip pucks off the wall and get him to the net.
He is their captain.
He's currently their captain. That's what I thought.
Yes,
Okay.
actively.
So yeah, just leadership ability. Those two were really impactful. I mean, Jordan Stahl was key to Pittsburgh's success through the late 2000s, early 2010s. So those two kind of being pretty easy comparables for me as big physical centers, who play really consistent, leadership driven, consistently kind of effort driven hockey, right? And those are two easy comparables. And you brought up Joel Eriksson Ek, which I think is the direction that Desnoyers could take if the team that drafts him develops him into a real defensive center.
Yeah.
Eriksson Ek is pretty similar as being a big body, being pretty physical, while also having some decent playmaking skill,
Yeah.
as a two-way center, while still being primarily a defensive guy. So I think that's the direction that Caleb Desnoyers can take as well. Let's close things off with a rapid fire here on the best team fits, and I think the easiest one for us was Montreal. I think they need someone to be able to support Nick Suzuki in the defensive zone. They absolutely need a left shot center. That
Yes,
is
they
a
do.
must. They need a guy who can win faceoffs on the left circle. The only
Christian
one they have,
Dvorak can't be that guy forever.
and he's gone. by next year. Like I don't see the Habs hanging on to him.
No,
So if Caleb Desnoyers can join this group of guys, I think the Habs might actually be targeting Desnoyers very heavily in this draft and might even trade up to
trade up.
target him. Yeah, because I can't think of a better replacement for a guy like Dvorak in the short term, and a better supporter for Nick Suzuki long term as a defensive presence, while also having that mindset, that mental aspect that Kent Hughes, Jeff Gordon, and especially Marty St. Louis are seeking right now, right?
Absolutely. And when do you think he'll be NHL ready? Like D
I
plus two?
I think D+2 at the very, very latest. I think this is a
Wow.
player
Okay.
who, yeah, I think this is a player who projects really well to the NHL. I don't think the pace issues are going to really limit him too much, especially if he's playing more defensive hockey, more forechecking hockey. The ability to make dynamic plays on puck isn't going to affect him that much. That's my read on that. I also think Philly would be a great spot for him as well. They
Yeah.
need some centers to kind of bolster their ability to win faceoffs and to support a guy like Matvey Michkov down the middle.
And they'd love his style of play there.
100%. New York Islanders, I feel like this type of player is right down their wheelhouse in terms of what they're looking for out of the draft. Pittsburgh as well. I mean, we just talked about Jordan Stahl. They have a great history as well with guys like Brandon Sutter and those types of guys playing down the middle and playing really impactful minutes for him behind the likes of Crosby and Malkin. I think they'll be looking for a similar profile. And finally, the Utah Hockey Club will probably be looking for someone similar. They've got Clayton Keller, they've got Matthias Michelli, they've got Logan Cooley, they've got those dynamic
Dylan
elements.
Gunther.
Dylan Gunther. I mean, they need someone who's going to be able to play those physical two-way
Yeah.
minutes. Caleb Dinway brings an element they don't have right now, so I think that's really, really interesting for them. But that's our episode done. Thanks very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, remember to check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey. We've got Flip and Steele giving you the best advice you can find out there regarding your fantasy hockey team. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we close off January and we close off my last month at Elite Prospects. This has been Hattie Callicash with Sebastian High. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we hope you tune in next time.